You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bava. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. Ukraine would accept a US proposal for an immediate 30-day ceasefire if Russia agrees, Kiev and Washington have said. After 9 hours of negotiations, senior US officials ended the pause on military assistance and intelligence sharing, which Kiev had warned was costing Ukrainian lives. US President Donald Trump announced, then walked back plans to double tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium to 50%. Trump threatened the extra levies after Ontario raised the cost of some electricity exports to the US. A separatist militant group in Pakistan's southwestern Balochistan province says it has taken 214 hostages, including military personnel, after hijacking a train, as the country's security situation continues to decline sharply. Telco giant Airtel has announced a partnership with SpaceX to launch Starlink's high-speed satellite internet services in India, years after Elon Musk's company made its first moves to enter our country. India is working with Mauritius to protect the island country's national interests and secure the Indian Ocean region, Prime Minister Modi has said, as he highlighted New Delhi's role in building critical infrastructure and also boosting development. US Vice President J.D. Vance is set to visit India later this month, accompanied by Second Lady Usha Vance, as per reports. Well, our big focus, Ukraine would accept a US proposal for an immediate 30-day ceasefire if Russia agrees. This is what Kiev and Washington have said. After 9 hours of negotiations, senior US officials ended the pause on military assistance and intelligence sharing, which Kiev had actually warned was costing Ukrainian lives. But as the Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said, the ball is now in Russia's court. He said this as the US is expected to present this plan to the Kremlin shortly. Meanwhile, Moscow's position remains unclear, although one Russian lawmaker has said that the plan was unacceptable, while a former advisor to Russia's President Vladimir Putin said it was a proposal to rearm the Ukrainian army. Just listen in to what Trump had to say about this plan, followed by Jessica Stone's report from Washington, D.C.
Very importantly, and I said it, Ukraine, ceasefire, Ukraine, ceasefire, just agreed to a little while ago. Now we have to go to Russia and hopefully President Putin will agree to that also, and we can get this show on the road. We can get this horrible war where 2,000-3,000 soldiers a week, every week, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 sometimes. I get the reports, and they're not American soldiers. They're Ukrainian and they're Russian. But people are being killed outside of that. People are being killed in the cities as things explode throughout the cities. And we want to get that war over with. So I think it's a very big, I think it's a big difference between the last visit you saw at the Oval Office and this. So that's a total ceasefire.
Announcing this 30-day ceasefire, American officials made one thing very, very clear, that the ball is now in Moscow's court to agree to this temporary ceasefire in order to get to more long-lasting discussions on what would be needed to achieve a lasting peace in Ukraine. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz telling reporters, quote, Ukraine has taken a concrete step towards peace. We hope the Russians will reciprocate. And, quote, the number one goodwill gesture we can see from the Russians is to see the Ukrainian offer and reciprocate it. Now, apart from this conversation is the conversation going on about the critical minerals deal. We understand that that is a separate line of negotiation, that it continues between the Ukrainians and the Americans, even at this hour, and that every indication is that agreement will be signed, and that is part of what U.S. President Donald Trump is offering as a security guarantee. It is unclear in the ultimate next phase of negotiations, should we get there, what kind of security guarantees the U.S. is prepared ceasefire to offer, because historically we have not heard that President Trump is interested in offering any, but that Europe has been asked to move forward to guarantee the peace on the ground. However, Moscow has said very clearly it does not want peacekeepers in Ukraine, and yet that is a contingency that the Ukraine definitely wants to have before agreeing to any potential peace deal. So for now, the talks hopefully will move forward, provided that Moscow agrees to this latest ceasefire deal.
Well, now, for the first time, Russia is being asked to make a commitment, though it is still unclear what will follow if it does sign up. But for a quick comment, we have with us live from Washington, D.C., Ray Locker. Thanks so much, Ray, as always, for making time for us. We have information that Russia is actually launching air attacks on Kyiv and Kharkiv hours after Ukraine says it is ready to accept the ceasefire. How do you really see the ceasefire playing out?
Well, it's easy for Ukraine to say they want a ceasefire. I mean, they're the country that was attacked. They say they wanted a ceasefire. Now they're getting the surveillance assistance back from the United States. So that's the easy part. We're seeing Russia's answer so far as they're continuing the airstrikes on key Ukrainian cities. So this is a long, long, long way to go before anything really happens.
Well, we will have to be patient and see how this plays out and how Putin and Moscow respond. But as always, Ray, we will revert to you for regular updates. For the time being, let's turn our attention to the other big story we're tracking. A separatist militant group in Pakistan's southwestern Balochistan province says it has taken 214 hostages, including military personnel, after hijacking a train. This as the country's security situation continues to decline sharply. The Baloch Liberation Army blew up the tracks and fired on the Jafar Express train as it traveled through a tunnel in a remote and mountainous area, bringing the train to a halt. Now, this train had about 400 passengers on board. It was trapped in the tunnel and the driver was badly wounded. Local authorities, police and railway officials have confirmed this without confirming the BLA's account of hostages. But we have a victim's reaction for you. Listen in.
लोग चीख रहे थे, गाने मार रहे थे, बस कुछ लेट गए, हम भी लेट गए पूरी ट्रेन में, सब लोग लेट गए कि अपनी जान बचाएं। बस बाहर से कुछ फायरिंग हुई, ब्लास्ट हुए, आप लोग नीचे उतरे, लोग नहीं उतर रहे थे, मैं अपने बच्चों को लेके उतर गया।
Joining us now from Islamabad is Sarah Zaman, Voice of America's Pakistan Bureau Chief. Sarah, as always, thanks so much for making time for us. We're hearing that dozens have been freed, but we're also picking up on the fact that hundreds of people are still held hostage as these militants hijack this train in Pakistan. Sarah, we seem to be having an issue with your audio. Right, while we reconnect with Sarah Zaman, who joins us live from Islamabad, let me bring you up to date with what's happening at the moment. Well, a train has been hijacked in the Balochistan province. A separatist militant group in Balochistan province has taken responsibility for this, saying that 214 hostages, including military personnel, have been taken hostage. This as Pakistan's security situation continues to decline sharply. The BLA blew up the tracks and fired on the Jafar Express train as it traveled through a tunnel in a remote area. That brought the train to a halt, which had about 400 passengers on board. Currently, we are still waiting to hear how many people have been held hostage. We are hearing that dozens have been freed, but we're also picking up on the fact that hundreds of people are still held hostage as militants hijack this train in Pakistan's Balochistan province. We'll get you the latest from Islamabad. For now, let's turn our attention to the United States. Donald Trump has halted a plan to double US tariffs on Canadian steel and metal imports to 50%, just hours after first threatening them. But tariffs of 25% are still going ahead, and they'll take effect from the 12th of March, which is in fact today. So the move by the president comes after the Canadian province of Ontario suspended new charges of 25% on electricity that it sends to some northern states in the US, hours after Trump threatened to sharply increase his tariffs on the country. On the other hand, Trump has dismissed fears of a recession and brushed aside the stock market sell-off, which we've been extensively covering. Meanwhile, the White House press secretary referred to the tariffs imposed by India on American alcohol and agricultural products and said that Trump believes in reciprocity. Listen in to what the US president had to say, followed by the White House's reaction.
Do you think there will be a recession?
I don't see it at all. I think this country is going to boom. But as I said, I can do it the easy way or the hard way. The hard way to do it is exactly what I'm doing, but the results are going to be 20 times greater.
Mr. President, you asked...
And remember, Trump is always right, right?
And what do you say to Americans?
If you look at what I've said over the last 10 years, Trump has been right. The right thing to do is what we're doing. We're going to get our jobs back, and we're not going to be left at. Now, I will say this, that already Canada, and I respect very much, as you know, there's a very strong man in Canada who said he was going to charge a surcharge or a tariff on electricity coming into our country. He has called and he said he's not going to do that. Okay, he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did, and he's not going to do that, so I respect that. But we were just informed that he's not going to do that. Look, we've been treated very unfairly by Canada. We've been treated very unfairly by Mexico. But we've been treated very unfairly by every country all over the world. The European Union is horrible, horrible. And we're going to get it back. And I have a choice. I could just coast, and eventually there'd be a blow-up down the road, maybe a long way. But we owe $36 trillion, and we're going to get it back.
150% tariff on American alcohol. You think that's helping Kentucky bourbon be exported into India? I don't think so. 100% tariff on agricultural products from India.
My colleague Maha Siddiqui has been tracking the latest. She joins us live from Vancouver at the moment. Maha, this volley marks the latest back and forth in a brewing trade war that presents an early economic test for Trump, as many are saying. But take us through the latest reactions in Canada.
Well, at the moment, what we are seeing in Canada is a step back, especially from the Ontario province, where Doug Ford has said that the 25% surcharge that we were only discussing yesterday, Parameshwar, on electricity, that is going from Canada, from the province of Ontario to Minnesota, Michigan, and New York, that surcharge has been lifted. And this after Donald Trump went ahead and announced that he would be doubling the tariff on steel and aluminum for Canada. And after that, Doug Ford stepped back on his 25% surcharge, and now things going back to the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. So clearly the sparks or the spurts of tariff threats come from both the sides. But in this case, as far as Canada is concerned, Doug Ford's response of 25% surcharge seems to have riled up Donald Trump, but in some sense also giving US a very clear sense that Canada has a leverage on energy and that they can use this leverage when this trade war that has been unleashed, as Canada says, by the US against its closest partners, not just in trade, but even otherwise, the neighbors and allies, that is Canada, is not going to go down well with them. So for the moment, the situation remains as such. However, Canada and several of the premiers in Canada, as well as the federal government, has made it amply clear, with the new Prime Minister-elect Mark Carney as well, also saying that US needs to go back and Trump needs to go back on all the tariff threats and the trade war for the situation to go back to normal.
Well, let's see what Trump's next move will be. But as always, Maha, thank you so much for joining us with the lowdown. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Modi, who's on a two-day visit to Mauritius, is to participate as the chief guest in the country's National Day celebrations today. He has said Mauritius continues to be at the heart of India's Sagar initiative, the security and growth for all in the region vision, which he unveiled during a trip to Port Louis just a decade ago. He added that India is working with Mauritius to protect the island country's national interests and also secure the Indian Ocean region, as he highlighted New Delhi's role in building critical infrastructure and also boosting development. News and updates continue in a moment right after this very short break. Please stay tuned.
I've been reporting on all issues, big and small, from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting Mauritius for a two-day visit after a decade now, and with a focus on deepening bilateral ties, trade and cultural exchange. This visit is going to prove a milestone in the Indo-Mauritius ties. For all the latest updates and highlights of this visit, do stay tuned to NDTV.
In today's interconnected world, India's voice is more crucial than ever. When India speaks, the world listens. At NDTV World, we are that voice, bringing you intelligent and insightful news from India and beyond. From geopolitics and diplomacy to economic shifts, migrations, tech disruptions, and the stories of our diaspora. We cover the news that shapes our global future. NDTV World, your new home for global news, is here.
A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right, and center. Conversations that get to the core of the debate.
How often have you turned away from debates that descend into endless fights? We bring you a show where every question is answered, where every debate finds its resolution, where every story finds its conclusion, where opinions collide but facts prevail, where stories unfold with insights and trust. When the noise ends, the last word begins.
I've been reporting on all issues, big and small, from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting Mauritius for a two-day visit after a decade now, and with a focus on deepening bilateral ties, trade and cultural exchange. This visit is going to prove a milestone in the Indo-Mauritius ties. For all the latest updates and highlights of this visit, do stay tuned to NDTV.
In today's interconnected world, India's voice is more crucial than ever. When India speaks, the world listens. At NDTV World, we are that voice, bringing you intelligent and insightful news from India and beyond. From geopolitics and diplomacy to economic shifts, migrations, tech disruptions, and the stories of our diaspora. We cover the news that shape.
Welcome back. A separatist group in Pakistan's southwestern Balochistan province says it has taken 214 hostages, including military personnel, after hijacking a train. This as the country's security situation continues to decline sharply. For the latest developments, let's go across to my colleague who's joining us from Pakistan at the moment. Joining us now, actually from Islamabad, is Sarah Zaman, Voice of America's Pakistan Bureau Chief. Sarah, we're hearing that dozens have been freed, But we're also picking up on the fact that hundreds of people are still held hostage after militants hijacked this train in Pakistan.
Right. Thank you so much. So security officials have confirmed that 104 people have been released. This includes 15 children. And this update came about 7 hours ago. So in these last 7 hours, we have not seen the number of hostages released increase. Now, 17 of these people have been shifted to hospitals because of their injuries. And the latest update that we received recently says that suicide bombers are present among the hostages. So they're holding hostages with the suicide bombers. And so therefore, there is this concern that in case of anything going wrong, these suicide bombers could explode themselves, causing serious damage and serious loss of life. And this is why security officials are consistently saying that the operation is very complex, it's very complicated. And at one point of time, we also learned that the security troops were following these attackers in smaller groups, which tells us that the combat is happening at very close range.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us with the lowdown. As Sarah is reporting, 104 people have been released, but suicide bombers are said to be present among the hostages, making this a very complex operation. We will, of course, get you the latest from Islamabad with Sarah Zaman for regular updates. Meanwhile, switching tracks, Airtel, one of India's telecom giants, has announced a high-stakes partnership with SpaceX to bring Starlink's high-speed satellite internet to India. This marks a monumental step in SpaceX's long-anticipated entry into the world's second-largest internet market, years after its initial efforts were met with regulatory hurdles. But SpaceX still needs the green light from India's Department of Telecommunications before it can officially launch its service. And also, with a history of regulatory run-ins, including a public rebuke back in 2022 for launching pre-orders without proper licenses, the big question is, could this deal face more scrutiny before it actually becomes reality? In fact, there are questions about whether Starlink could truly be the solution for India's connectivity crisis, especially in rural areas. But for quick clarity, we have with us Ivan Mehta at the moment. Ivan, thanks so much for making time for us on NDTV. Is this partnership as foolproof as it sounds, because regulatory approvals are still pending? And also, many are questioning whether this partnership could face the same fate as the previous Starlink launches, which were forced to cancel pre-orders and also refund customers.
First of all, thank you for having me on the show. I think regulatory approvals are still pending, so we can't really say that we'll see Starlink anytime soon in India, given that OneWeb, also Starlink's, one of the Starlink's rival, had scored a partnership with Airtel back in 2023 November, but we haven't seen progress a lot in that sector. Naturally, there is an issue of spectrum allocation where Indian players are saying there should be an auction and foreign players are saying there should be done in an administrative way. So I think those are a few hurdles that we might see even before the service comes in. And after the service comes in, Starlink is not cheap in any senses. It costs anywhere between $100 to $300 depending on equipment and plans. So I think institutions will possibly explore this if they want to have the connectivity in areas, especially rural areas, and then we might see some personals adopting this as well.
Well, let's see how this plays out. Ivan, we will, of course, revert to you for regular updates on how this disrupts the Indian market. The entry will not just be a win for Airtel. It's also going to be a direct challenge to Mukesh Ambani's telecom empire, Reliance Jio. So the question remains, will Jio's deep pockets and political influence keep Starlink from reaching Indian shores? Or will SpaceX cutting-edge tech take over? These questions remain unanswered at this stage, but we will, of course, be tracking the latest developments for you. Thank you so much for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest updates for you.
A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right, and center. Conversations that get to the core of the debate.
How often have you turned away from debates that descend